So inshallah we will begin. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Wa alaikum salam. Yes, on YouTube I can see the comments. Jazakallah khairan. Right. So in the last lesson we began looking at what Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah spoke about with regards to the wisdom or the wisdoms behind the creation of the devil, and how that is related to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the context of that discussion, if you remember, was regarding the nature of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. So this posed a great, it became a matter of confusion for a lot of people, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills evil to occur. And so how do we understand that? And if we are meant to be content with everything that Allah decrees, then does that, and evil is something that Allah decrees, does that mean therefore we are meant to be content with it? And so that's the context of the overall discussion at the moment. And obviously the shaitan there is evil with the devil. But as Ibn Qayyim mentioned last week, there are many wisdoms behind the creation of the devil and allowing him to tempt man away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we spoke about that last week. So here he continues by mentioning those potential wisdoms and benefits. So he says, وَمِنْهَا, meaning from the wisdoms, أن ظهور كثير من آياته وعجائب صنعه حصل بسبب وقوع الكفر والشر من النفوس الكافرة الظالمة كآية الطوفان وآية الريح وآية إهلاك ثمود وقوم لوط. So he said from the signs, or from the wisdoms, is that many of the ayat and the عجائب صنعه, meaning the wonders of his creation or the wonders of what he can do, become apparent. ظهور. This is in reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's through the devil itself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests many of his ayat, many of his signs that point to his omnipotence, that point to his power and might. From amongst that, so حصل بسبب وقوع, that occurs how حصل بسبب وقوع الكفر والشر, that occurs through the occurrence of disbelief and evil from unjust disbelieving souls, such as the ayat al-Tufan, the wind that destroys everything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Tufan, very very strong and powerful winds. وآية الريح as well. Rih is another, Tufan is maybe a stronger form of rih, of wind. وآية إهلاك ثمود وقوم لوط, and so the signs in which the way that the mannerism in which Allah destroyed the people of Thamud and the people of Lut. وآية انقلاب النار على إبراهيم بردا وسلاما, and the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned the fire for Ibrahim from being hot to cold, and salama, and it was something that was peaceful for Ibrahim. It didn't burn him. So that's an ayah, that's a sign. But that could only happen if evil people existed, the evil people that done that to Ibrahim alayhi salam. والآيات التي أجراها الله تعالى على يد موسى, and the various different signs by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Musa alayhi salam. Okay, so all the different the signs of blood, the signs of the plague, and all of these and the diseases that spread, through these were the miracles of Musa alayhi salam, and that obviously was applicable to the people of Fir'aun, so to essentially evil people. وغير ذلك من آياته التي يقول سبحانه عقيب ذكر كل آية منها, and other ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end of mentioning them, in a number of verses, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً. Indeed, in that is a sign. وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And so, but however, unfortunately, most of them are not believers. وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. And indeed, it is your Lord who is the most mighty, the most merciful. And it's interesting how Aziz and the Rahim has been mentioned together like that. So, and that's the reality. When evil befalls, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes people or nations as a result of their sins and their transgression, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests that punishment, it should be a sign. So for many people, for example, the current pandemic was a sign. It's a sign that points to so many things about the nature of man and about the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فلولا كفر الكافرين وعناد الجاحدين لما ظهرت هذه الآيات الباهرة. That if it wasn't for the disbelief of the disbelievers, or the obstinacy of those who reject faith, then these very apparent verses or signs, ayat in the context of signs, would not have appeared. التي يتحدث بها الناس جيلا بعد جيل إلى الأبد. Those signs which are spoken about from generation to generation until the end of times, like the splitting of the sea. So the splitting of a sea was an ayah, it was a sign, and people up until today speak about it. And these are miracles that point to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that could only happen if there was kufr and disbelief. So that shows you the wisdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreeing disbelief, that it actually in another way it leads people back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ومنها أن خلق الأسباب المتقابلة التي يقهر بعضها بعضا ويكسر بعضها بعضا. And from the wisdoms as well is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created asbab al-mutaqabila, meaning He has created asbab, causes for things which are mutaqabila, which are essentially oppose one another. التي يقهر بعضها بعضا, which essentially causes which go into conflict with one another, and he will give examples that break one another. And he'll give examples. He'll give some examples here. So he says about this, وهو من شأن كمال الربوبية. So this points to the lordship, the perfect lordship of Allah, والقدرة النافذة, and his ability النافذة, which always is essentially implemented and cannot be denied by anyone. والحكمة التامة, and complete wisdom. والملك الكامل, and complete dominion. وإن كان شأن الربوبية كاملا في نفسه, even though, and this is an interesting point here, he says وإن كان شأن الربوبية كاملا في نفسه, even though Allah's lordship is perfect by itself, ولو لم يخلق هذه الأسباب, even if he wasn't to create these causes, even if he wasn't to create these causes, his lordship would still be perfect, meaning the perfection of his lordship is not dependent on these causes. لكن خلقها من لوازم كماله وملكه. However, the creation of these causes are from the lawazim, or from the consequences of the perfection, or of his perfection and of his dominion. Not that he needs them, but they because his lordship will be perfect even if he didn't create it. وقدرته وحكمته, and again, creating these causes point to his ability and his wisdom. فظهور تأثيرها وأحكامها في عالم الشهادة تحقيق لذلك الكمال. So for the appearance of these causes to appear and وأحكامها في عالم الشهادة, and for them to be essentially seen by creation and by people, then that essentially leads to تحقيق لذلك الكمال. It leads to actualizing and acknowledging that perfection of Allah. وموجب من موجباته فتعمير مراتب الغيب والشهادة بأحكام الصفات من آثار كمال الإله المطلق بجميع وجوه وأقسامه وغاياته. And so yeah, I mean, that's just really a reiteration of what we were saying. So what you will find, what does he mean by al-asbab al-mutaqabila? Sorry, I forgot to mention, to point that out clearly. I thought he would give some examples here, but he didn't. But we see opposites in life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, whether it be darkness and light, whether it be sea and land, whether it be good and evil, strong and weak, poor and wealthy. You have people who are healthy, people who are sick. Okay, so you have all of these things that go into conflict with one another, or we see these opposites, al-asbab al-mutaqabila. So obviously some of these things will be people will look at them and think, why does Allah allow, for example, illness to spread? Why is it that Allah has decreed that children get leukemia and cancer? Okay, so that's obviously something, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, decrees good health, but people don't speak about that. Okay, so obviously some people have a very limited vision and they only see the negative things and they don't see the good things. And there was, subhanAllah, and I think I mentioned this before, there was this clip of Stephen Fry. He was being interviewed by some, but Stephen Fry, is a atheist or maybe agnostic. I think he's an agnostic, but so he was interviewed by someone, and he said to him that after you die, if you were to meet God, what would you say to him? What would you say to him? And he said, child leukemia, what's that about? How dare you? He literally said that, how dare you? Okay, how dare you, decree such a thing, basically. So, but for the believer, he sees that in life things are created. Allah does that. He creates things in opposition to one another. So just as He has decreed sickness, He's also decreed good health. And overwhelmingly, in fact, it's good health. That's what He gives to most of creation. وبالجملة, so in summary, فالعبودية والآيات والعجائب التي ترتبت على خلق ما لا يحبه ولا يرضاه وتقديره ومشيئته أحب إليه سبحانه وتعالى من فواتها وتعطيلها بتعطيل أسبابها. So the signs and the things that occur in life, our servitude, etc., everything that occurs in life, التي ترتبت على خلق ما لا يحبه ولا يرضاه, those things that lead to those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might not inherently like, okay, jumla, overall are more beloved to Him than them not existing. أحب إليه. So for example, this is, you have to listen to this point carefully. So when someone disbelieves, when someone transgresses, when someone commits a terrible deed, that's something that he has willed. Now, the fact that he has willed it, it's more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than it not occurring. And that is because there will be some wisdom in Him decreeing it, in Him actually decreeing it. فإن قلت فهل كان يمكن وجود الحكم بدون هذه الأسباب? So if it said, now the rest of the lesson today, it will be like this sort of dialogue. that he's throwing questions at himself. Basically, these are questions that people raise. So if you were to say, is it possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يمكن وجود الحكم, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create something, bring something into existence بدون هذه الأسباب, without these causes actually taking place. So for example, one of the ways to manifest Allah's power is by people disbelieving and thus destroying them. But Allah can manifest His power without actually them disbelieving. So Allah's manifestation of, or whatever He wants to manifest of maslahah, of benefit and of wisdom, is it really dependent upon those causes? This is the question here. So he says, هذا سؤال باطل. This is an invalid question. It's similar to what many people ask. Like, okay, if Allah knows, this is a very common question. If Allah knows that we are going to paradise or some people are going to hellfire, why make us live this life? Why not just put us into paradise? Why not just put us into the hellfire? Okay, because Allah knows what's going to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's going to happen. But imagine yourself in that position. Okay, imagine, for example, you are in, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, Allah decrees that you are, He knew that you were going to be from the people of hellfire, and so He didn't create you in this world. As soon as He created you, He put you in the hellfire. Now, the natural question anybody you would ask is, well, why am I being punished? What did I do wrong? Yeah, and he will feel that he's been wronged. He hasn't been given a chance. But anyhow, so he says, هذا سؤال باطل. This is an invalid question. إذ هو فرض وجود الملزوم بدون لازمه. Because this implies, in essence, that إذ هو فرض, meaning this basically implies وجود الملزوم بدون لازمه. This basically implies the existence of a malzoom. In this context, we can translate it as result. It necessitates the existence of a result before its causes. Okay, so you're meant to have a cause that leads to a certain result or a certain effect. But here, basically, it's saying that, why can't Allah manifest all of these things without evil actually taking place? And this is like كفرض وجود الابن بدون الأب. It's like, presuming the existence of a son without a father, or a child without a father. You need a father in order to have a child. والحركة بدون المتحرك, and there being movement without, بدون المتحرك, without there being something that can actually move. وَالتَّوْبَةُ دُونَ التَّائِبِ, and there being repentance without a repenter. Okay, now that, these things can't occur. So you need a cause and you need an effect. Now this argument itself, it's, I don't believe it to be that there are maybe things that you can poke at this argument, but nonetheless, I think it's a point there. Is this point not a bit contentious because it isn't necessarily answering? Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really so convinced of this argument, and there are other ways you can look at it. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, Isa alayhi salam. So yeah, but I suppose that had a purpose behind it. Because that's an ayah. Okay, it's but then, yeah, we're going around in circles. Yeah, if we say he done that because it's an ayah to show people. Well, yeah. Okay. فإن قلت فإذا كانت هذه الأسباب مرادة لما تفضي إليه من الحكم. So he says, if you say that إن كانت هذه الأسباب مرادة. So he says, if these causes are intended in and of themselves, لما تفضي إليه من الحكم، فهل تكون مرضية محبوبة من هذا الوجه أو مسخوطة من جميع الوجوه؟ قلت وهذا السؤال يورد على وجهين. So he says, yeah, so if what does it say in the full footnote? يقضي. Yeah, so there's a discrepancy in the different prints here. So if these causes were intended in and of themselves, remember we said certain causes aren't intended in and of themselves, they're intended for a greater purpose. So this could be an answer to the question, to the previous question, which is, why can't Allah create the consequences without the causes? Why can't Allah create the consequences without the causes? Because maybe the causes are intended in and of themselves. This is the point here. So فهل تكون مرضية محبوبة من هذا الوجه? So can we say these causes are essentially beloved to Allah from this perspective, even though they might entail some evil? أم مسخوطة من جميع الوجوه, or it is something which is despised by Allah from all perspectives? Here we're talking about evil that takes place. But remember, we said that if evil does take place in this world, it's due to a wisdom. So the cause is a means to a greater objective. Okay? So what do we say? Do we say that the causes are beloved to God, or the causes are actually hated by God, but the result is something which is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So he said, هذا السؤال يرد على وجهين. So he said this question, you can look at it from على وجهين. You can look at it from two perspectives, or you can answer it from two perspectives. أحدهما من جهة الرب سبحانه وتعالى، وهل يكون محبا لها من جهة إفضائها إلى محبوبه وإن كان يبغضها لذواتها. So he says, you can look at it from the perspective of Allah, from the perspective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, is it something, looking from the perspective, هل يكون محبا لها من جهة إفضائها إلى محبوبه? Okay, so you can look at it from the perspective of Allah. From the perspective of Allah, that evil that happens, or that He decrees, it will lead to something good. وَإِن كَانَ يُبْغِضُهَا لِذَوَاتِهَا, even though He will hate that evil in and of itself, like if it's dhulm, if it's kufr, if it's disbelief, okay, He will hate it in and of itself, or shaitan leading others astray. Or الثاني, you can look at it from the perspective of من جهة العبد, from the perspective of the servant. وهو أنه هل يسوغ له الرضا بها من تلك الجهة أيضا؟ فهذا سؤال له شأن. Or you can look at it from the perspective of the servant, which is it permissible for him to be pleased with what Allah has decreed, if it's something evil? Okay, so if Allah decrees that someone disbelieves, or that he permits oppression to take place, is it permissible for a human, for a believer, to be pleased with that from that perspective as well? Because if you think about it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not create unadulterated evil. He won't permit that. Whatever He permits will have some wisdom behind it. Therefore, a person can say, okay, I basically will like what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees that by decreeing that evil, some goodness will arise, then I'm pleased with that evil. Then I will be pleased with that evil, because we all agree, whatever Allah decrees, there is some wisdom in it. So therefore, we should submit completely to all forms of wrongdoing and dhulm and kufr that take place, because Allah has willed that there is some goodness in it. Okay, so this is the proposition here. So he says, look, he says, فَعْلَمْ. The answer to this is أَنَّ الشَّرَّ كُلَّهُ يَرْجِعُ إِلَى الْعَدَمِ. That evil, all evil, now this is maybe a bit of a philosophical point here, but all evil essentially goes back to Adam, non-existence. Because remember, if we said whatever Allah decrees, there will be some wisdom in it. So that's whatever is mawjood, whatever is present in the world, okay, it's there for a reason, it's there for a wisdom. Therefore, we can't say that anything that is in existence is essentially completely evil. There is some wisdom there. So therefore, it's a pure evil. The only way you can therefore define pure evil is al-adam, non-existence. أعني عدم الخير وأسبابها المفضية إليه, i.e. there being no goodness. Adam, non-existence, i.e. عدم الخير وأسبابه المفضية إليه. So evil is when there is no goodness. There is no goodness, or there is nothing that leads to goodness. That's what evil is. So evil is when there is no goodness and there is nothing that al-mufdi asbabuhu al-mufdiya ilayhi, and there is nothing that leads to evil, which is basically non-existence, al-adam. So وهو من هذه الجهة شر. So from this perspective it is evil, i.e. non-existence. وأما من جهة وجوده المحض فلا شر فيه. As for from the perspective of its وجوده المحض, as for from the perspective of its existence, meaning if it does therefore exist, if we said evil is non-existence, then if it does exist, then we say فلا شر فيه, there's no true evil in it. Because the fact that it exists indicates that Allah has allowed it to occur and decreed for it to occur, and therefore there must be some khair in it. Okay, so this is an argument. So مثاله, and he gives an example. أن النفوس الشريرة وجودها خير من حيث هي موجودة. He said, evil spirits, evil souls, their existence is better من حيث هي موجودة. Their existence is better than essentially their non-existence. وإنما حصل لها الشر بقطع مادة الخير عنها. So the evil that does occur from them, that the evil that occurs is due to بقطع مادة الخير عنها. It's due to there being no, or it being severed or cut off from goodness. فإنها خلقت في الأصل متحركة لا تسكن, because the nature of human souls is that they were created متحركة, meaning they're not still creatures. They're always going to do something, good or bad. Okay. فإن أعينت بالعلم وإلهام الخير تحركت به. And so if souls are supported with knowledge and with inspiration to do good, تحركت به, they will do that. وإن تركت تحركت بطبعها إلى خلافه. But if a soul is left to its own devices and it's not given knowledge, nor is it inspired with goodness by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will تحركت بطبعها, the human being will essentially move around upon earth according to its own human nature, okay, which will have many negative traits. حركتها من حيث وحركتها من حيث هي حركة خير وإنما تكون شرا بالإضافة لا من حيث هي حركة. Okay, so the movement, that whatever we do in life, in and of itself, we don't, it's not evil in and of itself. It's what we ascribe to it of goodness or all evil. وَشَرُّ كُلُّهُ ظُلْم, evil is all injustice and darkness. وَهُوَ وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَوْضِعِهِ, and the essence of evil is وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَوْضِعِهِ, is to place something in its incorrect place. فَلَوْ وُضِعَ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَرًّا, if something is placed in its correct place, then it will no longer be evil. By the way, he will go on to say that, look, okay, this is not easy to understand, okay, but he will go on to say that that this is quite difficult, and if you don't understand it, just ignore it, just move on, basically. So it's the assertion that such a thing as pure evil simply doesn't exist. Yes, that was the view of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, something that he propagated. فعلم أن جهة الشر فيه بمشيئة إضافية. So we therefore know that evil is something which is relative, basically. بمشيئة إضافية. It's something that Allah has willed, but due to its إضافية, it's basically, it's relative in the sense that it's not in and of itself evil, but it's due to an external or another factor. ولهذا كانت العقوبات الموضوعة في محلها خير في نفسها. For this reason, if we look at punishments that are given to people who have committed sin or have done wrong, they are, when they are placed and implemented correctly, خيرا في نفسها, they are good in and of themselves. وإن كانت شرا بالنسبة إلى المحل الذي حلت به لما أحدثت فيه من الألم الذي كانت الطبيعة القابلة لضده من اللذة. So, but if it وإن كانت شرا بالنسبة إلى المحل, so when you punish somebody correctly and you do it according to the Sharia, that's considered to be a good thing, even though it will be something which is harmful and painful, and to the place that is being punished. So meaning if you're getting lashed, for example, because of the pain, لما أحدثت فيه من الألم الذي كانت الطبيعة قابلة لضده من اللذة. Because when you physically suffer pain, you're not going to, the pain itself, you won't call that good. You say that pain is bad. It hurts. It's something which isn't pleasant. We don't define pain as something good. Pain is something that we try to eradicate. فصار ذلك الألم شرا بالنسبة إليها. So evil, so that pain will be evil بالنسبة إليها. Okay. من the طبيعة, يعني it's evil to our own nature. Okay, a person, for example, when they feel pain intrinsically, or instinctively, they will remove themselves away from that pain because they don't like it. It's something which is considered shar. But وهو خير بالنسبة إلى الفاعل. But it is good, that pain that they suffer from the punishment will be good in relation to the fa'il, yani the person who committed that sin, because it will be a kafara, a type of expiation. حيث وضعه موضعه, since Allah or that person was punished in the correct manner. فإنه سبحانه, and this answers Zakaria's previous question, فإنه سبحانه لا يخلق شرا محضا من جميع الوجوه. That's basically summarizes everything we've more or less said so far. Allah doesn't create pure, unadulterated evil from all perspectives. من جميع الوجوه. So there's nothing in existence that we can say it is completely evil from all perspectives. That doesn't exist. من جميع الوجوه والاعتبارات, from من الوجوه والاعتبارات is the same thing. فإن حكمته تأبى ذلك, because Allah's wisdom rejects that notion. بل قد يكون ذلك المخلوق شرا ومفسدة ببعض الاعتبارات. So that thing that Allah has created, which is considered to be evil and harmful, it can be evil and harmful ببعض الاعتبارات, from some perspectives. وفي خلقه مصالح وحكم باعتبارات أخرى. But this is the point here. By Allah creating these things and decreeing these things, there are certain masalih, benefits and wisdoms and positive, reasons for other positive reasons for their existence and for them being decreed. أرجح من اعتبارات مفاسدها, which are considered to be greater in weight than the mafasid, the harms and the evils that result from it. بل الواقع منحصر في ذلك. So we'll find this in reality. All of the things in reality, in existence, is subject to this principle, meaning that there's nothing that's pure evil. If there are things that are evil, then they will have some masalih, and the masalih will always outweigh the mafasid. The benefits will always outweigh the harms for them existing. فلا يمكن في جناب الحق جل جلاله أن يريد شيئا يكون فاسدا أو فسادا من كل وجه وبكل اعتبار, because it is not possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to want something which is evil from all perspectives. لا مصلحة في خلقه بوجه ما, that has no benefit in it whatsoever. هذا من أبين المحال. So this is from the clearest of things which are impossible. فإنه سبحانه بيده الخير, because goodness lies in the hands of Allah. وشر ليس إليه, and evil cannot be attributed to Allah. Pure unadulterated evil cannot be attributed to Allah. بل كل ما إليه فخير, rather everything that is attributed to him is good. وشر إنما حصل لعدم هذه الإضافة والنسبة إليه, but evil occurs due to certain perspective, and due to a particular, in a very relative way. فلو كان إليه لم يكن شرا. And so if it's something that is essentially that is attributed to Allah, it cannot be evil in essence. فتأمله, think about this, reflect over it. فانقطاع نسبته إليه هو الذي صيره شرا. Okay, this is quite a delicate point here, but he says فانقطاع نسبته إليه, when you stop attributing things to Allah, and this is very profound actually. This is a very profound point. He says when you stop attributing things to Allah, that is what makes things evil. That's what makes things evil. Because if we lived our lives recognizing that everything that occurs happens by the will of Allah and there is some goodness in it, then we will always recognize, even though it's evil, even though some badness, some evil has resulted from this, there is some khair in it. There will be some good in it, because we attribute things to Allah. But if we don't attribute things to Allah, then what will happen is there'll be no reason to say there will be goodness in those things. So we will only see pure evil. We will only see pure evil, and we won't see any goodness that results from it. And psychologically, that can be very damaging to a person. Do you think about it? Because that just opens up the doors to negativity and seeing things in a very pessimistic way. Yeah. Is there a reference here to the manner of Khidr in explaining his actions to Musa alayhi salam, i.e. the actions he refers to Allah and what actions he attributes to himself? I mean, there is a connection here. Yeah, there's definitely a connection here, but obviously there's nothing here that he explicitly mentions. Okay, but that story is a very good example of how you might see someone doing evil, such as, capsizing a boat, putting a hole into a boat, killing a child, okay, and doing these things, and people, you just look at it and you think this is just wrong, okay, but you don't see that there is some khair in it. Yeah. فإن قلت لم تنقطع نسبته إليه خلقا ومشيئة. Um, but if it said, if you were to say لم تنقطع نسبته إليه خلقا ومشيئة, but if you were to say that, essentially, no one has stopped basically attributing things to God in terms of what He creates and what He wills. قلت, so in response to that we will say هو من هذه الجهة ليس بشر. From this perspective, this is not evil. فإن وجوده هو المنسوب إليه, because what is attributed, what is existence, in existence, is attributed to Him. وهو من هذه الجهة ليس بشر, and from this perspective is not evil. والشرع الذي فيه من عدم إمداده بالخير وأسبابه. The evil that you see is a result of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, بعدم إمداده, is a result of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not essentially, imdad literally means supplying it with goodness and that which leads to goodness. والعدم ليس بشيء, and non-existence isn't a thing. حتى ينسب إلى من بيده الخير, so that it can be attributed to Allah. And so when something is non-existent, it's not a thing, and so therefore it cannot be attributed to Allah. He then goes on to say, I want to finish this section quickly because let's finish this section quickly. فإن أردت مزيدا, so if you want even further clarification, من إيضاح ذلك فاعلم أن أسباب الخير ثلاثة. So know that the causes for goodness are three: الإيجاد والإعداد والإمداد. فهذه هي الخيرات وأسبابها. So he said the causes for goodness are three: الإيجاد, and إيجاد means to bring things into existence. والإعداد, and once you bring it into existence, you prepare it in a way that it will be susceptible to goodness. Okay, so you give it the ability to do goodness. And then finally, al-imdad, okay, supplying it with that goodness itself. فهذه الخيرات وأسباب. So this is goodness and the causes to it. فإيجاد هذا السبب خير. So therefore Allah bringing it into existence is something which is good. وهو إلى الله. That is to Allah. That is attributed to Allah. So when Allah brings things into existence, we attribute that to Allah. وإعداده خير. And Allah creating the human being in a way that it can potentially do good. Again, وَهُوَ إِلَيْهِ أَيْضًا. We attribute this goodness to Allah. So the fact that Allah gave us the ability to bow and prostrate so that we can do salah, that's an act of goodness that we can attribute to Allah. وَإِمْدَادَهُ خَيْرٌ. And the fact that Allah supplies us literally with goodness, meaning through inspiration and through wisdom and through revelation, etc., that goodness is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in retrospect, that the same, I mean, he'll mention it. فَإِذَا لَمْ يَحْدُثْ فِيهِ إِعْدَادْ وَلَا إِمْدَادْ حَصَلَ فِيهِ الشَّرْ. So if there is no i'dad, if there's no preparation from God, or the way that if God doesn't prepare us to be susceptible to goodness, nor does Allah supply us with the means to do goodness, حصل فيه الشر. Evil will occur بسبب هذا العدم. Evil will occur due to the existence or due to the non-existence of these things which are essential for goodness. الذي ليس إلى الفاعل وإنما إليه ضده. فإن قلت فهل أمده إذ أوجده. So if you said, then why wouldn't He supply him with goodness if He brought him into existence? Okay. قلت مقتضى الحكمة إيجاده وإمداده فإنه سبحانه يوجده ويمده ومقتضى الحكمة إيجاده وترك إمداده أوجده بحكمته ولم يمده بحكمته فإيجاده خير والشر وقع من عدم إمداده. So whatever his مقتضى الحكمة إيجاده, so if Allah's wisdom dictates that something comes into existence, as well as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supplies that thing in existence with goodness, فإنه سبحانه يوجده, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring that thing into existence and will supply it with the ability, will supply it with goodness. And whatever Allah's wisdom dictates that He brings it into existence, but He doesn't supply it with goodness, then He will bring it into existence according to His wisdom, but He will not give it the ability, or He will not supply it with any goodness. So bringing it into existence is good, but evil occurs as a result of Allah not decreeing and supplying it with goodness. Okay, so then this continues now. So فإن قلت فهل أمد الموجودات كلها. Is Iblis an example of that second type? Yeah, so that would be an example where he brought it into existence. He gave the ability, but he didn't give the imdad. He didn't supply it. He gave it the i'dad, the ability, but not the imdad. And that's وَهَذَا مِنْ حِكْمَتِهِ, and that's from the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So فإن قلت, so if you were to say فهلا أمد الموجودات كلها, so why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supply all of creation with goodness, such that they just be all good people? قلت هذا سؤال فاسد, because this is an invalid question. يظن مورده أن التسوية بين الموجودات أبلغ في الحكمة. This is an invalid question because this basically assumes, in this question, there's an assumption being made here, or presumption that is being made here, that taswiya bayn al-mawjudat, that making everyone the same in creation, in terms of goodness, then that is more wise. أبلغ في الحكمة. Okay, so when we say, why did Allah create evil? Why can't everyone just be righteous? Why didn't Allah just decree that we are all good people, if He has the ability to do that? So you're assuming, therefore, that is wiser on behalf of Allah. So we're making assumptions on behalf of Allah, that therefore it's better. Who said it's better? Who said it's better? وَهَذَا عَيْنُ الْجَهْلِ. He says this is the essence of ignorance. بل الحكمة كل الحكمة, rather wisdom, true wisdom and complete wisdom, في هذا التفاوت العظيم الواقع بينها, is due to the massive discrepancies that exist in creation. The fact that some people will be righteous, some people will be evildoers, some people will be believers, some people will be disbelievers, some people, will be worshippers, some people will be, good worshippers, and there'll be other bad worshippers, and those in between. This tafawut and these discrepancies that we find in existence is from hikmah. وليس في خلق كل نوع منها تفاوت فكل نوع منها ليس في خلقه من تفاوت والتفاوت إنما وقع بأمور عدمية لم يتعلق بها الخلق وإلا فليس في الخلق من تفاوت. Okay, so this is a deep point. We could maybe skip that point there. فإن إعطاس ذلك عليك, and then he concludes, he says, look, if this is too difficult for you to understand, and and again, reading this for the first time, it might be difficult, or listening to the first time, it probably is difficult to grasp this. فإن إعطاس ذلك عليك, if this is difficult for you, ولم تفهمه حق الفهم, and you haven't understood it as it should to be understood, فراجع قول القائل. So just refer back to the statement of the one who said, is a line of poetry, إذا لم تستطع شيئا فدعه وجاوزه إلى ما تستطيع. Okay, basically saying, look, this line of poetry says, if you can't do anything, then leave it. If there's something that you can't do, meaning it's not within your capacity to do or to understand, فدعه, then leave it. وجاوزه إلى ما تستطيع. Leave it and just go on to do something else that is within your abilities to do. Okay, so the last few points that we were mentioning aren't that essential, maybe to this our discussion at chapter at hand, but hopefully for some of you, you've grasped something there and benefited. كما ذكر أن الأصمعي اجتمع بالخليل. It was once said that al-Asma'i, he met al-Khalil وحرص على فهم العروض منه, and he was very eager to learn al-arud, prosody. Okay, so how to read poetry in Arabic, basically. فأعياه ذلك فقال له الخليل يوما. فأعياه ذلك, meaning it was very difficult for Asma'i to learn prosody. He just naturally struggled with it, and that's the nature of poetry. It's either some people get it, some people don't. So Khalil said to him يوما. So Khalil, he told him one day, قطع لي هذا البيت. So basically, تقطيع الشعر is basically when you break it down, because as you know, poetry in Arabic conforms to particular meters, And when you're reading poetry, if you want to sort of break it down, this is known as taqti' al-bayt. So he said, look, break down this basically this line of poetry, وأنشده, and recite it. So he said, إذا لم تستطع, this line basically, إذا لم تستطع شيئا فدعه وجاوزه إلى ما تستطيع. Okay, so he was giving him a hidden message. Okay, ففهم ما أراد. Okay, so Al-Asma'i, he understood. Okay, I understand what you're trying to do. فأمسك عنه ولم يشتغل به. And so as a result, Al-Asma'i, he didn't, he withheld from, or he withdrew from studying prosody. ولم يشتغل به. And you know, he didn't go any further in his studies. وسر المسألة, and then he goes on to say وسر المسألة, and basically the secret of the matter, meaning the reality of the matter, أن الرضا بالله يستلزم الرضا بصفاته وأفعاله وأسمائه وأحكامه. Being pleased with Allah necessitates being pleased with His attributes, His actions, His names, and His decrees, His rulings, what He decrees. ولا يستلزم الرضا بمفعولاته كلها. But it doesn't necessitate being pleased with his maf'ulat, yani the objects of his actions. Okay, it doesn't mean being pleased with the object of his action, the maf'ul of his action, the direct object of his action. So for example, if Allah decrees kufr, we are pleased with Allah decreeing that, but the kufr itself, we are not pleased with that. We are not pleased with that. If Allah decrees that He allows oppressors to harm people, the fact that He has decreed that, we don't oppose that. We are pleased and content with that decree. But the dhulm itself, we are not pleased with that. That's the maf'ul. And that evil itself is not attributed to Allah. But حقيقة العبودية, rather the reality of servitude, أن يوافقه عبده في رضاه وسخطه. The reality of servitude is that a servant agrees with Allah in what he likes and what he dislikes. That's what it means to be an abd. You love what Allah loves and you hate what He hates. فيرضى منها بما رضي به. So we like what He likes, ويسخط منها ما سخطه, and we dislike what He dislikes. فإن قيل, but if it's said, فهو سبحانه يرضى عقوبة من يستحق العقوبة. So if it's said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with punishing those who deserve to be punished, فكيف يمكن العبد أن يرضى بعقوبته له? Okay, so this is an interesting point here. If Allah if we are meant to be pleased with Allah's actions, and Allah decrees that He punishes someone for their sins, we're meant to be content with that. What about if the punishment is to you? What about if you get punished as a result of your sins and disobedience to Allah? Are you meant to be pleased with that? And if so, how? And if so, how? قيل, isn't the reference in Surah Kahf about the story of Musa and Khidr? Yeah. قيل لو وافقه في رضاه بعقوبته لانقلبت لذة وسرورا ولكن لا يقع منه ذلك. So لو وافقه في رضاه بعقوبته. So if we say you are pleased with what pleases Allah, you are pleased with what pleases Allah, and so if Allah punishes you, therefore you are pleased with that. Therefore His uquba, Allah's punishment, becomes لانقلبت لذة وسرورا. It will be a cause of delight and joy. And that's not meant to be the case. ولكن لا يقع منه ذلك. But that doesn't happen. When Allah punishes you, you're not happy that Allah has punished you. Okay, so where does that leave us with respect to being pleased with what Allah has decreed? فإن لم يوافقه في محبته وطاعته التي هي سرور النفس وقرة العين وحياة القلب فكيف يوافقه في محبته للعقوبة التي هي أكره شيء إليه. And so if فإن لم يوافقه في محبته وطاعته, and so if you don't agree with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in what He loves and in terms of obedience, which is obviously the something which brings delight to the heart and is life to the heart, فكيف يوافقه في محبته للعقوبة? How could he agree with loving it or loving the punishment? How is that possible? التي هي أكره شيء إليه, which is the most sort of despised thing to him and the most difficult thing to him. Okay, وأشق شيء منه عليه. بل كان كارها لما يحبه من طاعته وتوحيده فلا يكون راضيا بما يختاره من عقوبته ولو فعل ذلك لارتفعت عنه العقوبة. بل كان كارها لما يحبه, rather if he was to dislike something that Allah loved in terms of obedience and tawheed, this is something that Allah loves, فلا يكون راضيا بما يختاره من عقوبته, then he will not be pleased with what Allah chooses for him of punishment. ولو فعل ذلك لارتفعت عنه العقوبة. If he was to do that, then punishment would be removed from him. رضا and الفرح, رضا and farah, being content with something is not the same as loving it. No, that's true. That's a good point. Being content with something doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, what we could say is perhaps farah, or being, showing joy, is a manifestation of rida, but not a necessary manifestation. Yeah, not even a necessary manifestation. I can be content in the justice of being punished whilst disliking having to be punished. Yeah, exactly. That he will go on to mention something like that. Yeah. So, therefore, this leads us to the question, and I'll leave you on this cliffhanger before we take a break. فإن قلت, if you were then to say, فكيف يجتمع الرضا بالقضاء? How can a person combine within himself being pleased with something that Allah has created, الذي يكره العبد, which is something that we naturally dislike, of sickness and faqr والألم مع كراهته? So how can that be? How is that possible? And Zakaria's kind of given the answer already, but how is it possible that we're meant to be pleased with what Allah has decreed, yet we hate those things? We hate certain things, sickness, poverty, pain. Okay, we naturally dislike those things. So how can we be content with those things? How can we be content with it? That's what we need to answer, inshallah. And we'll take a break now for 5 minutes, and then we'll resume after that, inshallah. So the time, that's interesting. We'll just say 8:07, inshallah. We will resume at 8:07, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll resume. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Okay. There was a good question that Talha asked before, Um, okay, oh, I thought I misread the question. So, tips on explaining problem of suffering to children preemptively before they hear it from atheist friends. I thought your question was how to talk about it to children who are suffering. Um, one thing you have to recognize is that when it comes to talking about Allah's will and Allah's decree, it is not something that everyone will understand and will appreciate. A child, for example, uh, might be too young to understand suffering or the wisdom behind suffering. And so what we must remember is that we shouldn't, again, have that sort of narrow vision and where we just think, as if the universe revolves around that individual. There are reasons that might be external to the individual that is suffering, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows that to occur. So the person who's suffering might not see the immediate wisdom behind it, in particular relating to them. But Allah might not decree the wisdom, might not decree that the wisdom is relating to you. The wisdom could be relating to something completely external to the one who's suffering or going through hardship. Because we are a creation as a whole. It's not just, again, the universe doesn't revolve around us as individuals. So people will come and go. People will suffer. Children will suffer. People will suffer. Innocent people will suffer. But they might not even live to see the wisdom behind it. Or they might not, it's not just a matter of living to see the wisdom behind it, but they will just, it will be completely beyond their grasp. So, expecting them to appreciate and to acknowledge the wisdom of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed will naturally be a very difficult thing. Okay, but ultimately what they must know is that as a general principle, and that's like it's a governing principle. That whatever suffering you go through in life, then it's a means of either you're expiating sins, in the case for adults, or رفع الدرجات, to Allah elevating your status in the afterlife and leaving the suffering of this world. Okay, so going, yeah. So the question the question that was posed before the break was, how could a person be pleased with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed, yet at the same time despise it at the same time, such as, or not just despise it, but dislike it, such as pain, poverty, and sickness. قلت لا تنافي في ذلك. I will say that there is no conflict or no contradiction between the two. فإنه يرضى به من جهة إفضائه إلى ما يحب, because he is pleased with it from the perspective of what it will lead to, of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes. ويكرهه من جهة تألمه به, but he dislikes it from the perspective of the pain itself. So the pain he doesn't like. So the pain in and of itself. So when you're honing in on the pain, it is something that you like? No. But from the perspective that it is something that has some maslahah or benefit behind it, from that perspective, he is content with that. كالدواء الكريه, like medicine which is very difficult to take in, الذي يعلم أن فيه شفاءه, and especially when he knows that the medicine has the cure. فإنه يجتمع فيه رضاه به وكراهته له, because in it, because that combines basically being pleased with it and being displeased with it. You're displeased with it because it tastes horrible or it's painful when you take the medication, but you're pleased with it and you're content with it because of what it will lead to. فإن قلت كيف يرضى لعبده شيئا ولا يعينه عليه, and that's another common question people ask as well. How could Allah like something for His servant? كيف يرضى لعبده شيئا, like tawheed, طاعة, obedience, وَلَا يُعِينُهُ عَلَيْهِ, and yet not assist him in doing it. There's a presumption being made, an assumption being made here. قلت لأن إعانته عليه تستلزم فوات محبوب له أعظم من حصول تلك الطاعة التي رضيها له. Because if Allah was to help that person and assist that person in doing good deeds, it would lead to missing out on something which is more beloved to Allah. Now you might think, how can that be possible? Surely by assisting him in doing goodness will mean that he's done the best thing. Not necessarily. Maybe keeping someone away from something is actually better for him. وقد يكون وقوع تلك الطاعة منه يتضمن مفسدة هي أكره إليه سبحانه وتعالى من محبته لتلك الطاعة. And it could be that وقوع تلك الطاعة, that the act of obedience happening itself could include within it a harm which is more despised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the love that He has for the act of obedience itself. بحيث يكون وقوعها منه مستلزما لمفسدة راجحة, meaning in a way that if he was to do that good deed, it would lead to a greater mafsada, greater harm. ومفوتا لمصلحة راجحة, and it's something that will make you, or it will make you miss out on a greater benefit. وقد أشار الله تعالى إلى ذلك في قوله, and Allah has pointed out to this point in His saying. This is from Surah At-Tawbah. ولو أرادوا الخروج لأعدوا له عدة ولكن كره الله بعاثهم فثبطهم وقيل قعدوا مع القاعدين. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had willed, ولو أرادوا الخروج, meaning this is in reference to the hypocrites going into battle. If they wanted to go out into battle, لأعدوا له عدة, that they would have prepared for it. If they claim, yeah, we want to go into battle, they would have done something. ولكن كره الله بعاثهم, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disliked them in bi'ath, meaning He disliked that they march forward into battle. فثبطهم, and so Allah literally made them cling to the ground, or He made them stay. He made them stay, meaning He diverted them away from doing a good deed. وقيل قعدوا مع القاعدين, and He was said, stay with those who stay behind, with those who literally sit behind. Why? لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادكم إلا خبالة, because if they were to depart with you in battle, the hypocrites, ما زادوكم إلا خبالة, they would not increase you except in خبالة, meaning except in loss, confusion, and in just failure. ولا أوضعوا خلالكم يبغونكم الفتنة وفيكم سماعون لهم, and they would have basically split your affairs, and they would seek fitna. They would seek the ranks of the believers becoming divided, strife amongst the believers. وَفِيكُمْ سَمَّاعُونَ لَهُمْ, and amongst some of you are those who listen to these people, to these hypocrites. وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ, Allah is aware and knowledgeable of the wrongdoers. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Surah At-Tawbah, verse 46 to 47, essentially prevents the hypocrites from doing something good, going into battle with the believers. Because He knows that if He had allowed them to do something good, it would have led to a greater mafsada. It would have split the ranks of the believers, and it would have made them turn against one another. So Allah informs, فَأَخْبَرَ سُبْحَانَهُ أَنَّهُ كَرِهًا بَعَاثَهُمْ أَنَّهُ كَرِهَ إِنْ بِعَاثَهُمْ, that He mentioned that He disliked them going forth مع رسوله للغزو, going forth with the Messenger in battle. وهو طاعة وقربة, even though it's whilst it's an act of obedience. وقد أمرهم به, and He even commanded them to do it. Look at that. He even commanded them to go into battle, but He didn't want them to. In fact, He prevented them. فلما كرهه منهم ثبطهم عنه. And since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oops, I forgot to put my charger on. I hope it doesn't disconnect. Sorry for that. Bismillah. Okay. Uh, so Allah commanded them to do it. Even though He commanded them to do it, but He disliked the fact that they would go forth in battle. ثم ذكر سبحانه بعض المفاسد. Then He mentioned some of the harms which would have resulted التي كانت تترتب على خروجهم لو خرجوا مع رسوله. He mentioned some of the harms if they had gone forward with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such as لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم إلا خبالا. If they were to leave and depart, then they would only increase you in خبالا أي فسادا, corruption, وشرا ولا أوضعوا خلالكم أي سعوا فيكم بينكم بالفساد والشر, i.e. they would have sought to sow the seeds of animosity between you. يبغونكم الفتنة, and قابلون منهم مستجيبون لهم, meaning there are some of those people who sadly would listen to them. فتولد من بين سعي هؤلاء بالفساد وقبول أولئك منهم من الشر ما هو أعظم من مصلحة خروجهم فاقتضى الحكمة والرحمة أن منعهم من الخروج وأقعدهم عنه. And so basically, Allah's wisdom and mercy dictated that He would prevent them from going into battle, and instead He made them sit back and remain behind. So He said, فَجْعَلْ هَذَا الْمِثَالِ أَصْلًا لِهَذَا الْبَابِ وَقِسْ عَلَيْهِ. So use this example from Surah At-Tawbah as a principle by which you work upon, and by which you compare with other situations, with other realities. Okay, and you make it analogous, basically. So, yes, it's true that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants all the people to do goodness, but He knows from His wisdom that by maybe allowing people and guiding people to do goodness, it will actually open the doors to a greater evil, or it will make them miss out on something which is greater in virtue. Okay, audio. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, I don't know why that happened. Okay. So I was just saying, so here it mentions basically that use this example that Allah mentions in Surah At-Tawbah as a base by which you work on and by which you make it analogous with other incidents. It basically to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes will prevent, even though He wants you to do good deeds, He might prevent you from doing so because of the evil that it could potentially lead to, or due to the fact that it might make you miss out on other good deeds. فإن قلت, so if you were to say قد تصور لي قد تصور لي هذا في رضا الرب في رضا الرب تعالى لبعض ما يخلقه من وجه وكراهته من وجه آخر فكيف لي بأن يجتمع الأمران في حقي بالنسبة إلى المعاصي والفسوق. Now he said that you have made me see, okay, so this is again this sort of conversation that's taken place. You've made me see how that you can be pleased, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be pleased with some of the things that He creates from one perspective, and He can be displeased with it from another perspective. Then how can it be, فكيف لي بأن يجتمع الأمران في حقي بالنسبة إلى المعاصي والفسوق. Then, but how do we understand that with regards to a believer committing sin? So when a believer commits sin, Allah dislikes it. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes it. But do we say He wills it for a wisdom? We said that He can prevent someone from doing a good deed for a wisdom. We've established that from the verse in Surah At-Tawbah. But where is the wisdom in allowing a believer to commit sin? Where is the wisdom in that? قلت هو متصور ممكن. So he said this is something that can be fathomed and it can be understood and it's possible. بل واقع. In fact, it's something which is a reality. فإن العبد يسخط ذلك ويبغضه, because a servant he despises that for himself when he commits a sin. Okay, we're losing connection again. Oh, video is lagging as well. I'm thinking, is it due to YouTube? Okay, there's only 2 people on YouTube, so I'm sorry for those 2 people who are watching on YouTube. Actually, is it? How can I tell how many people are watching on YouTube? It says 2, but I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna stop the YouTube. Okay, let's try that. And again, I apologize for whoever is watching on YouTube. Please join us via Zoom. Right, how's the sound now? Still crackling. Oh. I don't know what it's going on with Zoom these days. If you can just about hear it, if it's bearable, then we'll just continue, inshallah. Okay. I think it's my computer it's slowing down. Is it my computer? I don't know, because it's... Right. Okay, that's fine. So he said it's something that essentially is possible. وواقع بكسبه وإرادته. Yeah, it's something that is it's something that the servant despises. ويكرهه من حيث هو فعل له. And we also dislike the fact that it is an action that is attributed to us when we commit a sin. وواقع بكسبه. It's something that obviously occurs by our own efforts. Yeah. ويرضى بعلم الله وكتابته ومشيئته. Now this is the point here. But we are pleased. Now again, maybe not all of you will agree with this, but he says ويرضى بعلم الله وكتابته ومشيئته. We are pleased, but he will be pleased with the fact that Allah knows of it, He writes it and decrees it. وإذنه الكوني, and that Allah permits it to happen. Remember his Mashi'a al-Kawni, universal decree, he allows it to happen. فَيَرْضَى بِمَا مِنَ اللَّهِ. So from that perspective, he is pleased with it. That is something that Allah has decreed. وَيَسْخَطُ مَا هُوَ مِنْهُ. But he dislikes that which is from him. فَهَذَا مَسْلَكُ الطَّائِفَةِ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعُرْفَانِ. That this is the maslak, meaning this is one way of explaining it according to the people of the Gnostics. These are the people of Arifin, basically. A certain class of worshippers and scholars. That's one way of dealing with it. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I'm not too convinced of that. وَطَائِفَةٌ أُخْرَى, but another group, they explained it another way. رَأُوا كَرَاهَةَ ذَلِكَ مُطْلَقًا. They say, okay, it's disliked. All of that is disliked. وَعَدَمُ الرِّضَى بِهِ مِنْ كُلِّ وَجْهٍ. Meaning, you're meant to be, when you commit a sin and you do something haram, there's nothing that you should be content with. There's nothing that you should be content with. وَعَدَمُ الرِّضَى بِهِ مِنْ كُلِّ وَجْهٍ. From all angles and from all perspectives, there's no rida involved in this when it comes to sin and transgression. وَهَؤُلَاءِ فِي الْحَقِيقَةِ لَا يُخَالِفُونَ أُولَئِكَ. But this second group, in reality, they don't differ from the first group. Okay, they don't differ from the first group, because the first group are basically saying that, you dislike the action for yourself, but you're content with the fact that Allah has He's written it down and He has decreed it. Okay, but that doesn't absolve you from the sin, nor does it mean that you're justified to commit the sin. No. So, practical implications, there are no differences. This is what he's really trying to say. فإن العبد إذا كره مطلقا فإن الكراهة إنما تقع على الاعتبار المكروه منها. Okay, which is basically what we're saying. When a person dislikes a sin, they're disliking the fact that they are doing it themselves. وهؤلاء لم يكرهوا علم الرب وكتابته ومشيئته. And the second group that says there's no rida involved in sins, they're not saying that you're meant to dislike the fact that Allah decreed it. There's no contradiction. They're not saying that. Okay, so that would be, putting words into somebody else's mouth. They're not saying that. So they're not contradicting one another. So it's just about words and different way of expressing something, and so they're not contradicting one another, which is important. Because لازم القول ليس بقول, as the saying goes, that we shouldn't put words and opinions into people's mouths. Okay, when they haven't intended it in and of themselves. And this is one of the problems with many people. When they comment on other people's views and opinions, they're not commenting upon what they actually believe, but they're commenting upon the lawazim. Basically, they're commenting and critiquing the consequences of what people say. And the thing is, the consequences of what people say, the one who articulates those views might not agree with what you think his statement necessitates. Okay, and this is why they say لازم القول ليس بقول, like for those who know Arabic. But anyhow, وسر المسألة, and the secret of the matter, أن الذي إلى الرب منها غير مكروه. أن الذي إلى الرب منها غير مكروه. That which is attributed to Allah is not something which we can dislike. والذي إلى العبد منها, but the thing that which is attributed to the servant in terms of sin and transgression, هو المكروه والمسخوط. That is the thing which is disliked. Okay, so sin. So when it comes to sin, we can say that which is attributed to the servant, it's disliked and despised, but that which is attributed to Allah, we cannot despise it. فإن قلت ليس إلى العبد شيء منها. But someone could argue that nothing can be attributed to a servant because everything happens by the will of God. قلت هذا هو الجبر الباطل. This is the false position of the jabr. Jabr is coercion, and jabr here refers to basically the belief of the Jabariya, and the Jabariya believe that we essentially have no free will. We basically, whatever we do, it's just due to what Allah has decreed for us. We are just like a feather being blown in the wind. This is the Jabariya. الذي لا يمكن صاحبه التخلص من هذا المقام الضيق والقدر أقرب إلى التخلص منه من الجبري. So a person in this position who adopts the position of the Jabariya, it's very hard for them basically to escape from this predicament. Whereas the Qadariya are أقرب إلى التخلص منه من الجبرية. The opposite sect are the Qadariya. Now don't get confused, because Qadariya comes from Qadar. These are the people that actually deny Qadar. They deny fate. So they think basically, in simple terms, we create our own actions, and God cannot contravene, or God cannot counteract or oppose our will. So we do what we want to do basically in life. So it's easier for them basically to deal with this predicament, because they can just say, yeah, the evil came from us, it didn't come from God. But when you say everything comes from God in the sense that we have no free will whatsoever, then you're in a bit of a pickle, basically. But he says, وَأَهْلُ السُّنَّةِ مُتَوَسِّطُونَ بَيْنَ الْقَدَرِيَّةِ وَالْجَبَرِيَّةِ. Ahl Sunnah are between these two sects, Al-Qadariyya and Jabariyya. They're between those who reject fate and between those who believe that we have no free will. وهم أسعد بالتخلص منه من الفريقين. And they are more likely to, literally more happier, but they are more likely to free themselves from this predicament. فإن قلت فكيف يتأتى الندم والتوبة مع شهود الحكمة في التقدير? Okay, which is another question that might come to your mind, which is, how can we have regret and have and make repentance مع شهود الحكمة في التقدير, when we can actually witness and see the wisdom behind the sin? Okay, so for example, imagine you committed a sin, and in a way that sin basically saved you from a greater sin. Okay, so for example, a person committed a sin. Okay, they committed a sin, and they realized at that point that they committed a sin that made them turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It made them turn back to Allah. Had it not been for that sin, they probably would have carried on their life very distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a person can think, and well, subhanallah, that sin actually brought me closer to Allah. Okay, so they're in a way they are grateful for that sin. So how can they be regretful for that sin, and how can they make tawbah? This is a question, right? مع الشهود القيومية والمشيئة النافذة, whilst witnessing Allah's omnipotence and His will. Okay, or drinks alcohol rather than committing suicide. Yeah, I mean, or example like that. قلت هذا هو الذي أوقع من عميت بصيرته في شهود الأمر على خلاف ما هو عليه. This is the thing that has put people who are essentially عميت بصيرته, people who are blind-sighted. They have no wisdom. They cannot see. For those people, this has basically put them in a position which is very difficult to come out. So as a result, فرأى تلك الأفعال طاعات. So as a result, they saw those actions, those sins that they committed, because they lacked the understanding, they saw those actions as being acts of obedience. Those sins. They saw those sins that they committed as ta'at, acts of obedience. Why? لِمُوَافَقَتِهِ فِيهَا الْمَشِيئَ وَالْقَدَرِ. Because basically those actions fall in line with the decree and the will of God. So anything that falls in line with the will and the decree of God, basically it's good. وقال إن عصيت أمره فقد أطعت إرادته في ذلك. And so they'll say, if I have disobeyed his command, then I have obeyed his will in that as well. I have obeyed his will in that. وفي ذلك قيل, and with regards to that it was said, أصبحت منفعلا لما تختاره مني ففعلي كله طاعات. That I have essentially أصبحت منفعلا لما تختاره. That basically I am someone who is doing that which you have chosen for me. ففعلي كله طاعات. So all of my actions are essentially acts of obedience. Okay. So he said, وهؤلاء أعمى الخلق بصائر. These people are they're the most blind of creation. وأجعلهم بالله وأحكامه الدينية والكونية, and they're most ignorant of Allah's rulings, religious rulings and universal rulings. فإن الطاعة هي موافقة الأمر, because obedience is when your action falls in line with His commands. لا موافقة القدر والمشيئة, not when it agrees with fate. Okay, so obedience doesn't mean as soon as you do something, because it falls in line with Allah's will, that means it's good. لو كانت موافقة القدر طاعة لله لكان إبليس من أعظم المطيعين لله. If agreeing with Allah's will was an act of obedience, then Iblis would be the greatest of those who show obedience to Allah. Likewise, the people of Nuh and Ad and Thamud and the people of Lut and Fir'aun, they would all have been considered as people of obedience to Allah, because their actions fall in line with Allah's will. فيكون قد عذبهم أشد العذاب على طاعته, which therefore will mean that Allah punished them the most severe punishment for obeying Him. وانتقم منهم لأجلها, and that He took revenge in terms of punish them for their good deeds, for the good deeds. وهذا غاية الجهل بالله. This is the peak of ignorance, knowledge of peak of ignorance of ignorance of Allah's names and attributes. And he says, وهذا, if you look in the footnote, وهذا قول غلاة الصوفية. Okay, so this is a statement of the extreme Sufis. Okay, and I'm glad he said غلاة الصوفية, the extreme Sufis. And this is important because, unfortunately, people of Tasawwuf are often misrepresented in that many people say that, you know, they pass these blanket statements and they say, yeah, this is the belief of the Sufis. Okay, but most Sufis today, if you were to ask them this, probably 99% of them, if you were to ask them, do you believe that when you are committing a sin, you are doing a good deed? They'll laugh at you. Okay, they will laugh at you. So it's important that we don't, you know, misrepresent people's views and opinions. And that also, you know, why in particular did some of the Sufis say this as well? Because when we've spoken about the concept of fana before, annihilation, and we said that one of the stages of Tawheed is when a person reaches a level where whatever happens in existence, whatever occurs, they only see Allah in it. Not literally they see Allah, but they see the work of God in their own development, in their own actions, in the things that happen around them. And so as a result, a person might be misled to think that everything that happens, even your own sins, it's basically the will of God and something that He desires and He likes, which is obviously not correct. فإن قلت ومع ذلك فاجمع لي بين الندم والتوبة وبين مشهد القيومية والحكمة. So he said, okay, right, فاجمع لي, so just make me understand how I can have regret and repentance whilst observing Allah's omnipotence and His wisdom in decreeing basically me committing the sin. How can I be regretful for a sin when deep down inside I might think there's a wisdom behind it? قلت, I would say, العبد إذا شهد عجز نفسه ونفوذ الأقدار فيه وكمال فقره إلى ربه وعدم استغنائه عن عصمته وحفظه طرفة عين كان بالله في هذه الحال لا بنفسه. So when a servant sees his own ajiz, he sees his own inability, he lacks his own strength, and وَنُفُوذُ الْأَقْدَارِ فِيهِ, and he sees that only it's through the will of God that things can happen, and he sees كَمَالَ فَقْرِهِ إِلَى رَبِّهِ, he sees how he is in a state of destitution to his Lord, he is in a state of poverty in front of his Lord, وَعَدَمْ اسْتِغْنَائِهِ عَنْ إِصْمَتِهِ, and that how he how he essentially is completely dependent upon Him for protection. Even for the blinking of an eye, he is dependent on Him. Meaning he can't be free from the protection of an eye. He can't be free from the protection of Allah, even for the blinking of an eye. So this person, كَانَ بِاللَّهِ فِي هَذِي الْحَالِ لَا بِنَفْسِهِ. This person really is, he is a person who is with God. He's not with himself. فَوَقُوعُ الذَّنْبِ مِنْهُ لَا يَتَأَتَّى فِي هَذِهِ الْحَالَ الْبَتَّةِ. So when a person is at this level, sins, this person doesn't really commit sin. فَإِنَّ عَلَيْهِ حِصْنًا حَصِينًا, because this person is protected in a divine way. He's protected in a divine way, based on, and this is from the hadith, فَبِي يَسْمَعُ وَبِي يُبْصِرُ وَبِي يَبْتِشُ وَبِي يَمْشِي, that it's through me, it's hadith Qudsi, it's through me, meaning Allah. It is through me that he hears, it is through me that he sees, it is through me that he strikes, it is through me that he walks. It is by me, basically. Okay, and this is when does this occur? When a person sees himself to be completely useless and worthless without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he's completely dependent upon him. فَلَا يُتَصَوَّرْ مِنْهُ الذَّنْبِ فِي هَذِي الْحَالِ. You can't imagine a person who's really in that state, in that hal, to commit a sin. فَإِذَا حُجِبَ عَنْ هَذَا الْمَشْهَدِ, but if he is barred from seeing things in this manner, وَسَقَطَ فِي وُجُودِهِ الطَّبْعِي, and he sees and he falls into his own wujud, his own presence, his own natural presence. وَبَقِيَ بِنَفْسِهِ, and he remains with himself. Okay, what does this mean? He سَقَطَ إِلَى وُجُودِهِ الطَّبْعِي, he falls into his own sort of ego, meaning he sees himself independent. He sees himself to have, all of these good qualities. Okay, he thinks that he can develop all of these good habits by himself, and he can achieve success by himself because he has all of these positive things within him. When this happens, استولى عليه الحكم النفس والطبع والهوى. He's overwhelmed with حكم النفس. He's overwhelmed by his own ego and by his own desires. وهذا الوجود الطبعي قد نصبت فيه الشباك والأشراك. Okay, so what he's going to mention here is quite metaphorical here. وهذا الوجود الطبعي, this existence, meaning this this sort of natural ego, or this ego of man, basically, قد نصبت فيه الشباك والأشراك. This is why, fishing nets, literally, again, it's being metaphorical, have been cast out. Meaning, basically, that this is the way that an ashraq and shirk occurs. When people feel independent from God, when people feel as though goodness lies within themselves, and therefore they're not dependent upon God. وَأُرْسِلَتْ عَلَيْهِ الصَّيَّادُونَ, and this is why hunters are sent. Meaning, basically, this is the way, this is the door by which people catch you and make you fall into shirk and disbelief. فلا بد أن يقع في شبكة من تلك الشباك. And وهذا الوجود هو الحجاب. So, a person like this, he's bound to fall into a net. وهذا الوجود هو حجاب بينه وبين ربه. It is this presence, this state, or this existence, meaning this barrier, or this thing, where a person, again, he sees himself to be independent, that he has all the means to achieve success. That's all. It's a barrier between him and his Lord. It's a barrier between him and his Lord. فيقع الحجاب. And so this barrier is a veil that is drawn between him and his Lord. ويقوى المقتضى ويضعف المانع وتشتد الظلمة وتضعف القوة فأن له بالخلاص من تلك الأشراك والشباك. So that's basically when he falls into a pit, he can't rise from it. How can he save himself from those nets? فإذا انقشع ضباب ذلك الوجود الطبعي وانجاب ظلامه وزال قتامه وصرت بربك ذاهبا عن نفسك وطبعك. So he said فإذا انقشع ضباب ذلك. So if the انقشع, like to remove, الوجود الطبيعي وانجاب ظلامه. So basically when all of that dust is removed and the fog and the mist is removed from that darkness, وصرت بربك ذاهبا, and therefore you try to escape that and you go towards your Lord. عن نفسك وطبعك, you're trying to flee from your own ego, you're trying to flee away from your own self on journey to your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's when essentially you will be saved. بدا لك سر طال عنك اكتتامه ولاح صباح كنت أنت ظلامه فإن غبت عنه حل فيه وطنبت على منكب الكشف المصون خيامه فأنت حجاب القلب عن سر غيبه ولولاك لم يطبع عليه ختامه وجاء حديث لا يمل سماعه شهي إلينا نثره ونظامه إذا ذكرته النفس زال عناؤها وزال عن قلب المعنى ختامه. Okay, yeah, I mean, when translating that's going to take some time, but basically it's saying, you know, the true secret to your success, it lies in something that you have hidden within your own self. وَلَاحَ صَبَاحٌ كُنْتَ أَنْتَ ظَلَامُهُ, meaning basically it's you, the darkness within you, that is what prevents you from reaching your Lord. فَإِنْ غِبْتَ عَنْهُ حَلَّ فِيهِ وَطَنَّبَتْ عَلَى مَنْكِبِ الْكَشِّ الْمَصُونِ خِيَامُهُ. So if you become absent-minded basically, and you know, you fall victim to your own heedlessness, فأنت حجاب القلب عن سر غيبه, you know, you are the barrier between you and your heart and your Lord. ولولاك لم يطبع عليه ختامه. Yeah, so فهنالك يحضره الندم والتوبة والإنابة. At that point, that's when regret and tawbah and turning to Allah actually occurs. فإنه كان في المعصية بنفسه محجوبا فيه عن ربه وعن طاعته فلما فارق ذلك الوجود صار في وجود آخر بقي بربه لا بنفسه. Okay, so فإنه كان في المعصية بنفسه. When you are committing sin, you are basically alone. You are بنفسه, meaning you are left to your own devices. محجوبا فيها عن ربه, you are veiled from your Lord and being obedient towards him. فلما فارق ذلك الوجود, when you depart from that circumstance of being with your own self, صار في وجود آخر, you will be present in another reality. You will be with your Lord and not with your own self. You will be with your Lord and not with your own self. And so from that perspective, this is how you can achieve that nadam and regret. وإذا عرف هذا فالتوبة والندم يكونان في هذا الوجود الذي هو فيه بربه وذلك ينافي مشهد الحكمة والقيومية بل يجامعه ويستمده منه وبالله التوفيق. And that concludes that section. So that was quite a dense section. We will stop there for today because the next he will start off with another section from Manazil, Imam al-Harawi's statements. So what we'll do is we'll just open up the floor for any questions. Is the sound still really bad? That's good. No, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Ibn Qayyim has a tendency to obviously sort of digress into other points that are not so sort of embedded in the text, as you all know. Is there an infographic of this book? I haven't seen one. It'll be some task though. With topics like fiqh, it's quite easy. But yeah, yeah. If you think about it, not much khidmah has been done to this book, Madārij. Other than a few mukhtasarat, a few summaries, and those summaries are, most of them are quite, I don't think they capture the spirit of the book. There have been no written commentaries of it. I mean, it would be difficult. Even a hashia you would understand expect something like a hashia, someone to write like a hashia for it, but no one has done that. Ihya is preferred. I mean, I think they serve two different purposes. Ihya is quite similar to this in a number of ways. But the purpose for writing Ihya was very specific, and I think it's important when you read Ihya, you read it from the perspective of why Imam al-Ghazali wrote it in the first place, which was to reform the status quo at that time, so to reform the schooling system and the way the scholars engage with themselves and with others. Whereas this book is more generic. It's just laying down the sort of principles. Is it because of its size and that it's not a set of fatwa? I mean, Ihya is big. Okay, Ihya is technically bigger than Madārij, but that has commentaries and hawashi. What's the standard now for education in this field? What's the standard now for education in this field? If you mean a book, I mean, I think for beginners, Mukhtasar Minhaj al Qasidin is a must. I think that really should be. If I was to form a proper syllabus from beginning to end, then that would play a fundamental role. Mukhtasar Minhaj al Qasidin, which is what we're doing on Tawfiq Online. Do you feel that much of what Ibn Qayyim says here is due to him being in company of Shaykh al-Islam for too long? Or is it something Ibn Qayyim came about through his own learning and knowledge in the time he was alive? Ibn Qayyim was writing books before he met Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, and some have said that he was a lot more inclined towards tasawwuf before he met Ibn Taymiyyah. And that Ibn Taymiyyah obviously had a tremendous impact on him. But he was a scholar in his own right, and he was an independent thinker, and he differed from Ibn Taymiyyah on a number of issues, even fiqhi issues as well. So so he was quite independent. There's a Fatawa Alamgiriya of Al-Hind. Inshallah. Right, any more questions? Tariq al-Hijratain, on the side note, is it's not an easy read, but there's actually a summary of it. It's published only in 100 pages. Okay, it is available as PDF. I'll share it, inshallah. I actually taught quite a lot of it a few years ago, and it was an interesting experience to teach from it. But that's something I'm looking into, teaching that as because that could be covered in a 16-week term. Okay, so the summary of Tariq al-Hijratain in one term, in 16 weeks. We can do that because it's only 100 pages. So, inshallah. Is this section we've read basically a condensed version of Ibn Taymiyyah's writings on evil and good. I mean, Ibn Taymiyyah definitely goes into a lot more philosophical points, especially about husn and qubh. Okay, so there's a lot more there. But yeah, there's definitely an overlap in some of the things that Ibn Taymiyyah spoke about here. Yeah, what Ibn Qayyim spoke about here and what Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned elsewhere. Yeah. Okay, inshallah, if there are no more comments or questions, we will stop there for today. Inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody, and I shall see you all next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.